Hi, YouTube. Happy Sunday, and welcome to another edition of Sunday Conversations. Today, we have a guest whom I have only known from her online presence. We are calling her May. Her tagline, her name for the purposes of this of her work and of this broadcast is May in Bloom, and you can find her on YouTube. She's a YouTuber. So let me just tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll get going. So what she says here is, welcome to my channel, where it's just about a life rooted in intentional, holistic, and slow living. Anything from travels, soul talks, plant-based tips, and conscious consumption, creativity, and whatever else calls for visual journaling. May is big on decolonial, holistic well-being and existence. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I found her and what I know personally about her. So is young enough to be my daughter. Uh, but she just popped up one night in my feed, as these things do, and I saw that she was, her voice, when you hear it, you'll say, Erica, we love your voice. Man, can you believe it? People say they love my voice. I sound like I
You
just crawled out of
too.
a frog uh, place.
I find your voice so comforting.
Oh, that's what they say. They say it's very ASMR, which is ridiculous. But anyway, when you hear May talk and you hear the softness of her voice and her beautiful accent, you're going to want to kick me to the curb. Please
Oh,
don't, but you're going to want to. But she does these beautiful, calm, visual journeys in beautiful places, and she just talks. And she talks in her peaceful voice, in peaceful ways, about peaceful things, but not always things that are peaceful. I think that May is a metaphor. Her work is a metaphor for possibility in the world. We're going to talk about. I want her to tell you a little bit about her life story and her philosophy, and what my hope is that all of us can recognize ourselves as fluid people living in a fluid world which is willing to move with us where we want to go if we just stop standing still. So May, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here. I'm thrilled to have you.
thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here and also the conversation we're going to have with each other. You're so kind. You make me blush. If I could actually blush,
Oh, please.
I would be blushing for real.
I'll blush for both of us.
Thank you.
So May, you have such an interesting life trajectory in your, relative to me, youth. So where were you born and where did you go from there?
Well, I was born in Kampala, Uganda, many years ago, eight
Not
and a half.
many years, not many years ago, but anyway.
For me, for me, like the more when I scroll down, like when you're supposed to pick your age, I can see now it's many, many years ago. Um, but I was born in Uganda to very young parents who later they've moved a lot, mostly to provide us with a better life. And we moved to South Africa when I was, I think, 6, and then we stayed there for 6 years. And then with my mom, we moved to Denmark when I was 12. And then I grew up the most of my childhood in Denmark and my adulthood in Denmark. And then after that, I just traveled and lived in different countries. But I think that set the what do you call it? It set the mood for my life. That feeling of that you can always change where you are, and it also will always change you. And also being a person who belongs to so many bridges, because I don't belong anywhere fully. I feel like the choices my parents made in a way also helped, obviously, like all of us, shape the person I've become and how I've used that. First, it was a disadvantage, but it also helped me see all the advantages that come with having such an upbringing and having to travel the world through like that. Mm.
So you probably would say, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but you consider yourself, I would assume, a citizen of the world.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And I also, it's interesting you say it's a cliche because I think I saw it as a cliche until I hit my 30s and I was like, I got that big epiphany that you don't properly belong anyway. So you belong a bit everywhere. So you are. That's why maybe people say that. But I never related to it before because I think I was still thinking I could belong fully somewhere.
Well, and as human beings, we have that urge, right?
Yeah.
That urge to belong somewhere. I'm going to just say that, from my experience, again, which is very different from yours, my non-belonging is more about race than anything. So,
Mm,
my father was white, my mother black.
mm,
I was raised in the 60s, which was a certain political climate in the
yeah.
US. And so I was raised by both of my parents to consider myself blackity black, 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 all the way black. But of course, people look at me
Mm,
and they don't know what I am, and they'll ask, "Well, what are you?" And
mm,
I like to make them twist in the breeze. Like, what do you mean? What am I? What are you? What do you mean? What am I?
yeah.
I know what they're asking, and I will say that for me, it's created a liminal kind of a life, meaning that I do feel I am rooted in my blackness, but because of the way I look, the way I talk, people assume other things. And
Yeah.
so I am privy to, for example, conversation
Yeah.
that someone of your complexion would
Yeah.
probably not be privy to. And I
Mm,
say to myself, do they know who I am? Do they understand who they're saying this in front of? So
yeah.
I think it's given me, I consider myself sort of liminal, like you say, a bridge
Mm,
between both uh,
yeah.
identities.
Yeah.
And do I wish that I were one or the other? Yeah, a lot of times. But I
Mm,
also think that that liminality, as you say yourself, it's its own status. It's its own
mm,
thing.
yeah.
And that we're able to do work in the world in an easier way because we have this broader perspective, I
Mm,
suspect.
yeah.
A broader perspective that I assume for you, because I know for me, has been born partially anyway of pain. What was it like for you to go from first Uganda to then South Africa to Denmark? I mean, Denmark.
Extreme.
What was that like?
It was really extreme. I think it was in a kid's brain, there was a feeling of, I think because you're already just growing, just being a person is a huge journey, even if you stayed in the same place, because you're growing, you're learning, you're expanding your way of seeing the world. But then to be moved in such different environments in different conditions really accelerates that in a certain way. Like you have to grow up even faster because you're adapting to cultures, you're adapting to different languages, different worldviews. It's like a crash course
Mhm.
in growing up faster. Um, and I think when we came to South Africa, the thing that stood out the most, it was the first time I became race conscious. And obviously at that point I was like 6 years old, but this is post-apartheid South Africa that is trying to find a way to live in harmony, the Mandela dream, the Rainbow Nation.
Right.
But you could see clearly there were a lot of I always say like the tension and the racism there was like you could cut it with a knife, like it was thick. And then on top of that, not only having that, but also having xenophobia or Afrophobia, I think it's the correct word, and recognizing, wow, there is a hierarchy of people. And in that hierarchy of people, I'm at the bottom. As a young kid, like recognizing that with the way that we pass down oppression or we pass down putting people in that place. So the white person will say something to a native South African, and the native South African will be able to say something to me as a foreigner who didn't belong in South Africa, or they felt didn't belong in South Africa, right? And then you would see like, okay, so we're not all equal. Like as a kid, in the midst of just trying to find people to play with, you recognize we're not all equal, even though you become cognizant of that. And it's a very disturbing, for me, it was a really disturbing place to get to know that or become aware of that. But at the same time, it set the foundation to a lot of my interests later on in life and the things I've dedicated my learning to, like from that perspective, of these hierarchies, who gets to create them, does anybody win being above another, and how they shape our world. And I think being aware of that quite early like helped me to become really passionate about that. And then when I moved to Denmark, that was a whole different feeling, because Denmark is like it's fully a white country for the most part. We were living in the middle of nowhere. We were the neighbor kids that people would pretend to be going on walks, but they would walk by our backyard because we saw first snow that was like a proper first snow, like being kids that came from Africa. And we were like, we're gonna build igloos. I don't know if you remember, there was a show on TV with the penguins. It was like, I don't know, like they don't say anything. They're just like, penguin, do you know? Anyway, me and my siblings love that show. So they always lived in igloos. And when we saw snow, that was the first thing we thought about. We're going to build igloos. So we had this first winter, we were outside every day building this igloo. And so the locals, so like the African kids building an igloo, and they would walk by, but you felt like the way they looked at us felt different than when we were in South Africa. Like this was a different kind of interest or awareness. And that expanded my understanding also of whiteness. Like not all whiteness is the same. We're not all curiosity is the same. We're not all being seen as different is the same. And in that little village that we lived in and grew up in as African kids with my mom, like we actually met a lot of kindness, and we felt people were always bringing us stuff like, oh, we have these clothes or we have these toys, da, 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 we saw your kids. And at the end, like my mom had this big bond that was just full of things like, we have to stop saying yes to all of these things. So it's kind of generosity that we hadn't maybe experienced in the same way, we weren't even expecting, in this very, very wide environment. And that like also expanded, okay, now this is a new experience. It's a new way of being around different people who don't look like you. And this is a different way that they see you. And being such a minority in school and the questions you'd be asked at school that were very silly, very ridiculous. And at the end, I started just having fun with it, like being asked, like, did you grow up having lions and elephants in your back? And I'm like, yeah, actually my first pet was an elephant, you know. And people believed it. And I was like, oh, like when I'd be in class and I'd have a teacher talking about Africa, and then they would say something about a random African country, and then they'll look at me and be like, May, isn't that true? And I'm like, I'm 12 years old, like I barely, like I'm also learning. I'm like, but the feeling that Africa could be reduced to such a small and single story that even a 12-year-old would know, you know, like that was also quite interesting. So like every part of my growth and the places I moved to, like it expanded my understanding of us as humans, and the complexities of identity, and even where we place ourselves in those identities and how they shape us. And I think that in itself was a blessing, because I no longer could afford a single story, as Chimamanda talks about. And I think that kind of saved me, because once you recognize there's so many stories, then you get to decide which one do I want to believe, or which one do I want to add to, or which one do I want to write, you
I
know?
think that's a brilliant observation. And, when I was listening to you talk about your experience in South Africa,
Mhm.
I was thinking about my own here in the US, and the fact that the white people that I encountered
Mhm.
here, uh, like the ones that you encountered in South Africa, both of those systems, our system and the apartheid South
Yeah,
African system, with all of its remnants and echoes and all of that, grew a certain kind of white person.
yeah. And
So,
Black person.
and black person. And
Mm.
and all of us are scarred. We
Yeah,
don't necessarily perceive it as a scarring or a wounding, but that's literally what it is. And
I
so
believe.
interesting is to hear you juxtapose that experience with your experience in Denmark, where you may very well have been the first Black people that they saw, aside from what they maybe saw on TV,
Yeah.
but they
Mm.
because they didn't have the same backstory
Yeah,
as
exactly.
American whites or as the South African whites, they were
Mm.
able to see you as people and as
Mm.
interesting and as
Mm.
not non-threatening, right?
Yeah,
Um, I mean, I think that that's interesting because I think, like you said, it kept you. I think it was a gift to you
yeah,
because I think you were able to learn what a lot of, I'm just going to speak as a Black person, American Black people
yeah.
um, experience too rarely. It's more the exception, I would say, than the rule.
Mm.
And for us, it's because we're so, the country is so unwilling to grapple with its past.
Yeah.
I mean, at least South Africa, they have the Truth and Reconciliation
Mm.
Commissions, and they at least have discussed these things. Uh,
Mm.
but for us, no. So I think there's always this wall
Yeah.
and wariness in
Mm.
a way that you didn't have to necessarily develop because your formative years, you met all kinds of white people who had all
Yeah.
kinds uh, of their own experiences of what Blackness might mean.
Exact. But I think also to add to that, just like you go from one story to another, but the key point is we all have stories about the world and we all place different characters with different values and different things we associate them with. Because in in Denmark, the story was still there. It was still a story of these poor Africans to a certain
Mhm.
degree.
Mhm.
These poor Africans who maybe to a certain degree, maybe they were like, oh, they must be really shocked by using the toilet because they probably didn't have that before.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to give them all this charity, not just like neighborly kindness, but because they're from Africa. Or I remember even when later on when I would go to school, and I would have people ask me, so tell me, May, like, are your parents from diplomats? Are your parents diplomats? Or I no, first they would ask me if I was adopted.
Mhm.
And because Uganda was colonized by the British, and also a lot of the school in South Africa is also in English. So my education started mostly in English, even though like I've told you before, I have no language I feel very, very fluent in. I think they all mix together at this point. But like that was something that when I came to school in Denmark, I was advanced in that place for an African child, right? And they were trying, I could see they were trying to grapple with this idea of this African child who, by all of their stories and narrative, should be below them in everything, but who was better than them at this specific thing. And learning English was an important thing, like in Denmark, because a lot of our businesses, it's another official language we have. So I remember when I was older in school and being asked stuff like, okay, did are your parents diplomats or were you adopted? Because they couldn't think that I come from a mother who didn't. I don't think my mom finished high school. I think she almost barely did because of the war that happened in Uganda. And And my father was also not, I think he didn't finish more than the third class, third grade. I think that's what you'd say.
Mhm.
But I also came from people who were very creative and very dignified. And this is very important for me to say because I feel of all the things I inherited from my upbringing, that was one thing that your circumstances never had to dictate the dignity or pride you felt in yourself. And me and my siblings, we always carried ourselves that way. And it was interesting to see how it boggled people because in some places, people are shocked to not feel that you don't feel less than, or you
Mhm,
don't act less than,
mhm,
or you're not playing the grateful poor African, or you are. So you could see that there was this need also to place you. And if they couldn't place you, they're like, well, if she's not acting the way we expect her to, maybe she's adopted by white people who would give
mhm.
her the right to act like that. Or maybe from diplomats who spend most of their life in the Western world, who'd give her a reason or permission to act with dignity, right? And I always think about this poem by Maya Angelou, like it's one of my favorite poems, the one she talks about the kind of woman she is who walks as though she has done. And
Yes.
yeah, I love that because I think that
Phenomenal woman.
phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Mm.
And I think about that because I think of all the things about my mother, like that's something I can say of all the women in my family that it never really mattered what you had. It's always like how you saw the world and how you saw yourself. You always raised with a sense of dignity and to carry that in all circumstances, even if you had less, even if you were seen as less, it didn't matter. And I think this is something that grew further into the way I see about liberation and sovereignty and what we owe to each other as beings, to not have to prove or feel worthy to be treated a certain way, but to know that that's innate. That's how we are born, all of us, from a place of dignity, and that's what we deserve to live and be seen from, right? But I think I learned that a lot when I saw the different stories and how people wanted you to kneel or heel. How do you say it? Like when you make a horse
Oh, well, yeah, Neil, that
kneel.
works.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Kneel to their vision of what you're supposed to be, and that became also another tool of liberation for me because I recognize that everybody is going to see you according to what they think you're supposed to be, but at the same time, and that's also their right. I also fully believe in that, but it shouldn't be your limitation, and you shouldn't be trying to prove your humanity or your worthiness or even your intelligence. Or like I think when I was young, I had a moment like that where I was like, okay, I need to feel like I'm smart enough. I need to prove, and then I recognized that all the things I was doing was to show that I'm just like you, and I'm like I don't need to be just like these people or those people. I need to just be like me and show up in the way that I have a certain intelligence, which everybody has in certain different ways, and to embrace those differences, to embrace those talents, to embrace those skills without having to have them be validated through the systems that have decided are the validators of those things, right?
I think that, yes. And I mean, I think that that should be quite a startling and liberating message for a lot of my viewers who,
Mm,
I mean, I think, for example, of James Baldwin, who was a writer in the 60s, and the genre that he wrote was called protest literature.
mm,
It was very clear that his audience was never his own people. It was all
mm,
white people. Like, see me, acknowledge me, understand that I am as good as you, etc. And when the women writers came along,
yeah,
like Walker or Toni Morrison
yeah,
or the poets,
mm,
Audre Lorde or Nikki Giovanni, it
mm,
was very clear that that was not who their audience
yeah,
was. That
mm,
they were using their own lens to tell their own stories about
mm,
themselves. And if
yeah,
people want to eavesdrop,
yeah,
and that's great, but
yeah,
but this is not meant for you to convince you
exactly.
of anything. I mean, I think that way about my channel. Like in the
Mm,
beginning,
mm,
we had just had the election, and I had people, and so you May is in France at the moment, and she travels all over Europe. So, again, I don't believe that I America is the focus of your
mm,
microscope or your telescope or anything like that. But so I will say that I would make reference all the time to the fact that 92% of Black women
yeah.
voted for the Black woman candidate.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And as it turned out, 54% or some people say 47. I'll be nice,
Mm,
split the difference. We'll say
yeah.
50% of white women
Mm,
voted for Trump.
mm,
And so I would always make reference to the 92%. And I would say, Black women here are not a monolith. We're
yeah.
not a monolith. We come from all different backgrounds and
Mm,
we're just not a monolith.
mm,
However, when it matters, we know how to act as a monolith.
yeah.
92% of us did what we did.
Yeah.
Well, I had white women on my channel infuriated, saying,
Mm,
basically, they didn't vote the wrong way.
yeah.
They blah, 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 blah. In other words, the lens is always personal and
Yeah.
individual. And,
Mm,
and there's no understanding of a group or a collective identity, so
mm,
to speak. And you hurt our feelings, or they'll say you hurt. Well, no, they would speak for each other. You hurt our feelings when you refer to the 47% or the 52%.
yeah.
But like, here's the thing. I am looking at this channel is my lens and the lens of my guests. And
Yeah.
so you don't have to agree,
Yeah.
but you're welcome here at this table if you
Yeah.
want to understand and learn and dialogue.
Yeah.
Because the you know the background, the template is not white.
Yeah.
This is, I think, very startling to people.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about you, and you've referenced it, is, I mean, I think that people could conceivably even say there's something anarchical about what you propose or how you live.
Ooh, you're gonna have to explain that word.
Okay. So anarchists,
Oh yeah, that's yeah, that
but
I understand.
yeah, that whatever, let whatever
Yeah.
happen happens, and that da, 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 da. Um, I mean, you live, I think, from what I see, and of course, like everybody's presence online, it's curated, but
Yeah.
your curated presence leads me to believe that you live relative to most people a very free life. And it seems as though it comes from this philosophy that you've been discussing.
Mm.
Have you always lived that way, or was this an evolution?
Def Definitely an evolution. I,
Mhm.
I think I think I'm in a moment of my life where I'm like really, really digging into spirituality. When I left religion, more than a decade now ago, I
Because you were raised as a Christian, is that correct?
I was raised as a very dedicated Christian,
Right.
and religion shaped everything I did, how I ate, how I lived in the world, how I projected my future. I wasn't a Sunday Christian. I was like, okay, this, we are way of hell and heaven constantly, and um, and and I always speak about that place, that time in my life is also very important and authentic because that's exactly what it felt like, and it was something I inherited from the people that created me, and it also played its role in a good way, but it also had a lot of negative things that it passed down to me. And I think when I left religion, I was then hit with this realization that what am I then? What am I doing here? What's going on? And I because so much of my life was left and kind of decided by the way my religious upbringing was set up and the things we believed about what was going to happen in the future. To have your future ripped away from you, like everything you're working towards, everything that's always in the back mind, but everything you do, da, 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 judgment day, you might go to heaven, you might go to hell, what have you. For that to go away, it was so scary and so shocking. Also because when I was younger, I lost my siblings, my older siblings, so I'm like a default older sister. But I always believed, obviously, that they were going to be there for judgment day and what have you. So my religion was also very important to me because I imagined that that was the only way I'd ever be able to see them again. And to lose all of that and to awaken to a possibility that that wasn't authentic to me anymore. And I had to forge my own understanding of the world. I was also very intentional to not jump into anything else. that felt dogmatic
And
right
so
away.
wait a minute. So you said two really interesting things just then. One
Mm,
is to lose that, and then the second thing was to open yourself up to other
mm,
possibilities.
mm,
So, I mean, what is, because I mean, listen, I went to divinity school. I was going to be an Episcopal priest
mm,
until the bishop said, Erica, there's no question that we need you as a priest in this church. So I'm thinking,
mm,
okay, good. And then he goes, the question is,
mm,
want you? Are we ready for you? Come back in 2 years. I said, you know that expression to be a fool for Christ?
mm.
I said, that may be one thing, but no, I'm not going to be a fool for this church. And
Yeah,
I never went back.
yeah,
What happened? You talk about losing or having
yeah,
taken from you. What
yeah,
happened to go have you go from being this church girl
yeah.
to not?
Travel is the thing that messes up a lot of things in your life. But in this way, like I had gone to Paris to do an internship. And during that time, every time I would go abroad, because when I was going to university, I always tried whenever they would have exchange programs, I took advantage of that because for me it was the best way to travel. Being raised by a single mom, like you could apply for some scholarships, and it was a good way to see the world. So I was doing an internship in Paris, and whenever I'd go abroad, I'd try to find my church, my local church. And for some reason, I think the church in Paris I was supposed to go to was under construction, so they were not like fully open. And also it was very far away, so I couldn't go to church, but I was like keeping up with my reading more or less. But then something happened where because I was still struggling a lot with my mental state at that point. Like I've always had a very active mind, and it took me a long time to recognize that it didn't have to be that way. That I could also be in charge of what was going on in my head. I always felt like okay, there were always these two voices: the devil, Jesus, and me, and I was always like bouncing back between those things, judging my thoughts. What is that? Da, da, da. But then I remember falling randomly online to Leslie Brown. I don't know if you know this guy, but he's like an American motivational speaker. And he was talking about the power of the mind. And at this point, I'm 23, 20. Yeah, I'm 23. And I had never heard anything like this before, right? Of course, in religious teachings, we have like, watch your words, like we learn about like, yeah, thinking of good things, but not in the way he presented it. And for some reason, I just consumed a lot of his content, which led to other people who were talking about how to manage your mind. And I started feeling like I could manage my mind in a different way. It had nothing to do with good or bad or judgment of evil or what have you. It was more about like I can actually try to focus on things differently, and I can make things happen for myself in a different way. But what ended up happening from that was that I started to feel much better. Like I started to walk around the city feeling confident, feeling assured, feeling less doomy. And then it hit me like I think I had dug into this space for a while, and I was like, oh my goodness, I haven't read my Bible in some days. And I was like, but I felt really good, and that should not exist. That should not be possible because that was my upbringing. Like I knew that my closeness to God or the Bible, the teaching, was also how I sustained my well-being. And it wasn't even something I did intentionally, but being not able to read my Bible and like digging into this place of like mental management and how positive thinking, like how much lighter it had made me feel conflicted. And it it sparked a space in my brain where a question came that had never maybe had been able to come. And it was like, but May, you've never really researched everything about this book you dedicate your whole life to. And I
Mm.
think you should, because I felt guilty that I hadn't been reading my Bible. And I was like, you know what? I need to go back to my Bible. I need to actually be grounded back in the word. And also, I need to understand it on a bigger scale so that I can never be uprooted from it. And then when I was entertaining that thought, it said you should research everything, even the other side. Because if something is true, it cannot fear investigation or a fair investigation. And that was the first time in my whole life that I dared to question beyond the books we were allowed to read and the books explaining the things that other people might say are not true. I allowed myself to just go free. Like it was the most freest moment of my life. And for 3 weeks straight, every day, like I had this internship that ended at 7. But before that, during my break and after, like I'd stay up just researching, like reading everything, and I'll just follow like the rabbit hole basically. This leads to that, leads to that, leads to that. How did the Bible come to be? How did they decide the books that were in it? Just anyway, it's a long story. But basically, at the end of the 3 weeks, I remember putting my computer screen down and realizing I can't believe in this anymore. Because, and I think it was maybe also because the way that we taught, I learned my religion was that everything is the truth, like in the Bible. And we were very literal about the Bible to a certain degree. And so, if anything, any spark of inconsistency or contradiction could not be explained for me. I'm somebody who I love, and that's something I say a lot on my channel. Things have to make sense to you because I know if I believe in something or I've dedicated myself to something I don't fully believe in, I feel like I'm on wobbly ground, like I'm not grounded in it. And that's always been important for me. When I was religious, I was seriously religious.
Yeah.
But then that space of doubt and clarity at the same time came in, and I recognized it wasn't strong enough of an argument for me to
Mm.
believe in it, then I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe in this anymore. And at first I was like, oh my God, does that mean I'm going to be a bad person? Am I going to start sinning? I'm going to start doing reckless behavior because there's no consequences. And that was what was also life changing in that moment because I no longer now believed in the voice of the devil, nor the voice of God. And I was like, it's only my voice. And who am I? And I had never had that opportunity. Like, who am I when the devil and God are not talking to me? Or everything good that happens to me is because of God. Everything bad is the devil. What am I in all of this? I'm just a little thing that gets moved left and right. When that was all gone and it was just me, and I feared because that was what I was trained to believe that without God I would be a savage, even though I no longer see that as a bad thing. And I think we need more savagery in a radical way to change the world. But like I understood that okay, I actually, because there's nobody coming to save me from all of this, I need to do what I can do. It's up to me to make the world that I want to create. And if there's no heaven coming for us, I need to make the most of heaven I can find here, or even add to it. Like it really grounded me. That of course it was a week of despair and like shock, but then after that I was like, I'm a very okay. Now what we're gonna do about it? That's usually how I go through life. Okay, get a moment, go deep in the depression or what you need to feel, but then after eventually I'm always like, okay, what can I do about it? And it changed the trajectory of my life in every way because it made me care about the environment differently. It made me care about political situations differently. The way I eat, I had a different reason now to do all of those things. And I recognize I'm not such an evil person, even if I don't have a reward to look up to or fear of hell. I can actually be motivated to do stuff because I care about these particular things. You know, I care about my fellow humans. I care about the earth I live on. And that was like such a
So one of the things that I'll say about you that has always struck me
mm,
is that you're not religious. I'm not religious either, for
yeah,
very similar reasons.
yeah,
I do find you a very spiritual person. And so
yeah,
one of the things that I'll tell the viewers is that I watched May for a long time, a couple of years, I guess.
mm,
Then I got the urge. I said, you know what? Let me reach out to her. And I sent you an email and
mm,
I offered to read cards for you.
yeah,
And I'm sure you must have thought, wait, what? With what?
yeah,
But eventually you said, you know what? I think I'd like to
yeah,
and so because what I wanted to show you, I guess,
mm,
is that instead of that sort of binary understanding, right, of
Yeah.
hell and heaven and God, the
Mm.
devil, etc. The way I look at it is that is sort of what you're saying is that we are it while we're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would also say that that we have a higher self.
I also agree.
So when I read cards,
Mm.
when someone allows me to read for them,
Mm.
their higher self is contracting with my higher self to
Mm.
find the information that resides in the higher self. And what is that information? It's everything. It's the
Yeah.
past, the future, the present. It's all of it all together. And so
Yeah.
it's not as though what you find is that, okay, there's no hell and there's no heaven. There's just me and my
Mm.
little physicality and my mind. It's more than that. You understand that you are a world,
Yeah.
are a
Exactly.
universe, right? And
Yeah.
I think that religion, all religion, I'm just going to say,
Mm.
is created and constructed to take that knowledge from you,
Yeah.
that knowledge of your own divinity away
Yeah.
for the
Mm.
purposes, of course, of control.
Yeah.
Right. So I
Mm.
love that you were open to hearing what the cards had to say for you, to
Yeah.
understanding that that was essentially you talking to yourself, and that
Yeah.
it was just the translator.
Yeah, which is also very important because I remember I think I told you that it was interesting. I was because you had reached out and offered this beautiful thing, and at the same time, like I've never, even though I stayed spiritual when I left religion, I never wanted to belong specifically to any process of spirituality. I'm very intuitive about it. Like if something calls me, and okay, I'll explore it. But I don't feel like because I'm spiritual, I have to do this. That I
That's right.
went from all of that. But I remember when you reached out, it was after my 35th birthday, and for some reason I was like, I'm curious about another guidance that I might need and that's usually how things start for me. Like it's an idea. I'm like, okay, how could that? And then you reached out, but I was when you offered the cards, I was like, oh, I don't know if I believe in this. I don't know how I feel about that. But I'm gonna think about it. And then when I was like, oh, I need to answer Erica because she's always so nice, and maybe I don't feel comfortable about it, so I need to let her know. I was literally writing that to you that thank you so much, but I'm not because I always like, do I feel good? Do I believe in that? But as I was writing, I was like, thank you, Erica. Da, da, da. You know what? I thought about it and I would like to do it. But it was in the
Yeah,
exact
you paid
moment.
attention to what you heard. Yes.
It was in the moment I was writing that I decided to do it. Before all of that, I was literally going to let you know that actually I'm not sure, maybe it's not the right. But then and when we had the conversation, it was everything and more that I needed and as you said, like it almost feels like you need to hear certain things through other people sometimes. As independent as I try to be about my journeys in life, I think also I'm learning about more and more about the community aspect of it. You don't have to carry everything by yourself, and everybody has different gifts that can guide you and assist you on your journey. And you came and your gift came at the right moment. And I was just so intrigued by the way it happened, that how I even in my head thinking, I don't know, but when I wrote, it was clear from the sentence I was typing, okay, I'm gonna do it. I guess I'm gonna do it. But what that gave me, as you say, like it was that feeling of like, okay, there's things that you can know on an emotional level, but you need affirmation sometimes. And that was exactly what you were able to give me. And it made me feel more grounded. It made me feel more like, okay, I am on the right path. It's not just something I am convincing myself of. But someone else can see that too. And the way that you shared, like it was the first time I learned about that. And then I started to learn a bit more about it and
And
see
this is
how,
just one way. I mean, it's
yeah.
just a particular modality, but the
Mm.
whole point of it is to show us
Mm.
the kinds of things that you already know, you know,
Yeah.
that, that you are the captain of your ship.
Mm.
And so things like cards or meditation or whatever modality you use
Yeah.
is just another language that you can use to speak to yourself.
I agree. I fully agree. And I think it's only now that I get it more and more. Like I think I've kept a lot of spiritual practice at bay, like there are people who have like what do you call it? Altars of certain things or like family members and when I was in Brazil there's a lot of like spiritual practices as well that I would see. Like I remember driving down streets and then at the crossroad you'd see stuff and I'd be like, what is that? And then they'll explain what it was and things that I think because of the experience I had religiously, I was just very like, I don't want to feel like I have to do anything
Right.
spiritually, right? And even in the spiritual liberation spaces, it felt like then you just like, it's kind of like when I went natural. I remember leaving the straight hair experience and being like, I want to actually just get to know what my hair is and simplify my routine. I was tired of like most Black kids, you grew up in a bathroom full of products, all the hope of of mothers and women to one day rule your hair and make it look great
Make
and
it
all
good, they call it good hair.
like
Yes.
good hair. And then I remember like getting my natural hair and then like watching a lot of videos, which was a lot of like great information. But then the cycle started again. Now there was all these products again that we needed to have the certain curls and have like the routines were like getting longer and longer. And I was like, what the hell? I literally escaped one thing to come here and it's
Do you know that, I mean, I don't even know what the number is, but the black hair care industry is a
like gigantic.
$1 billion industry. You know what? I've been watching you long enough that
Mm,
I remember your videos
mm,
about when you locked your hair. And you did
yeah,
when you turned 30, I think.
yeah.
And it was a very intent. I loved it because it was very intentional, very
Mm,
spiritual. And I've had locks before. I've had this is my third or fourth set, and
mm.
grow each set for 7 years, and then at 7 years I'd be like, you know what, I want to start all over again. So I get. But here's what I learned in this particular journey, hair journey.
Mm, mm,
So I was watching this YouTuber. Her name is Ingrid from Toronto.
mm.
And she only has like 2,000 something subscribers, but she talks about her hair journey. But
Yeah,
here's the bottom line. She has locks.
yeah,
She said, our hair, the way it grows out of our head, that's the way
mm,
it's supposed to grow.
yeah,
And you don't need any products. She said, and I watched her for a couple of years too, and I thought, because I had had locks, but I had
yeah.
had the lock stuff that you put in it
The
and
manicure,
the
yeah.
oil and the okay. But she's saying you don't need anything. And she said, listen, think about it. Our
Mm,
hair is like, if you want to think of a material,
yeah,
suede. Would you
yeah,
put oil on suede?
yeah,
No, you'd ruin it.
yeah.
So I said, you know what? With this set, I'm going to do an experiment. So here's what I'm going to do.
Mm,
First of all, I'm not going to part a grid. No
yeah,
grid.
yeah,
What I'm going to do is just go like twist it around my finger.
yeah,
It'll stay in a curl.
yeah.
And then I'm just going to leave it alone.
Mm,
I'm going to wash it once a week with a
mm,
clarifying shampoo.
mm,
No oil on my scalp because does one's scalp not produce oil? This is
yeah,
the other thing. Black women think that they
mm,
have to put oil in their scalp because their
mm,
scalp's dry. Well, the oil clogs the pores. The pores
mm,
then don't know what to do. They stop producing oil. But I said, no,
mm,
I'm going to start this from scratch.
yeah,
The first time I washed my hair was maybe I wash it once a week.
yeah,
So at the end of the week, right before I washed it, I'm in the shower and I'm running my hand through my hair. I said, wait, what is that on my hair? I didn't put any shampoo yet. What is this on my? And I look and my palm had oil on it. I'm like,
that's-
what?
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my God, what happened? That's my own sebum from my own scalp. Thanking
exactly.
me and saying thank you for not drowning us anymore and
Yeah,
do you a solid and produce it for you on your own. And you don't
yeah,
have to do anything. So I have just let this just grow out of my head. I
yeah.
do nothing,
Isn't
nothing.
it magical?
I wash it once a week. It
Yeah,
is liberating.
isn't it? And I
Yes.
feel like I really feel like as Black women, as Black people in general, our hair is it's like a companionship. It's a companion on our journey to liberation because at every at every level of my hair journey, I saw also the societal oppressions that I was what do you call, like, opposing on myself. And with relaxed hair, I remember like thinking, I'm like, okay, so when we relax the hair, our hair is naturally very coily and it
Right.
likes to stick together.
Yep.
And we relax it so we weaken the structure so it can fall limp and flat. Our natural hair is very coily and goes towards the sun. But because we feel that that is not what beauty should look like, or we feel like that's not manageable, we chemically weaken it, literally. So that it can. And I remember, I think when I heard like in America, you have this saying that if it's straight, no, what was it? Relax time makes white people relax. Like I remember the saying properly, but I remember like if your hair is relaxed, then people around you will feel more relaxed, right? Like it was more like in that line.
People, because that's
Yeah.
the lens through which you see yourself. That's
But
right.
exactly, but that's like the white gaze that you have
White
internalized,
gaze.
right? And you judge your beauty on those standards. I'm like, what if my beauty standards were to be in a different on a different focus? Like, what if it wasn't how straight my hair is, but how full my hair is? What if I was actually aiming for my hair to look like the clouds and for it to grow taller and closer to the sun and not to the ground? And I'm like,
You would know your own magnificence. And you
my
know
own
what?
power, my
Your own
own
power.
beauty.
And that's
Yeah.
why there are workplaces and schools in this country anyway,
Yeah.
you are not allowed to wear your natural hair.
And that is wild to me. That is absolutely wild. But we do, like, even because the most police I ever received wasn't from white people. It
No,
was
from
from
what?
fellow Black people.
Mhm.
And we had internalized that that's how you look properly. And I remember when I decided to tell my mom, I'm not gonna relax my hair anymore. I'm just gonna let it grow out and actually figure it out. And like, yeah, but hair is really difficult if you don't. I'm like, I'm gonna figure it out. And I realized the hair was never difficult. It's what we expected it to do that was making it difficult,
That's right.
because you were morphing it into a way of being that was not created for it. And I saw that as a symbol, also even for a metaphor for our own existence, that you will never thrive if you're trying to mold yourself to a system that was never created for you. And
Exactly.
and even when we moved forward and like we would go into the natural hair movement, the things you could see that it was hard to let go of that internalized white gaze. And you're like, okay, so I'm gonna be natural, but I want to be closer to mixed race, right? Natural. I want my
Exactly.
hair to, so you were still using that as your North Star. Like that's
You
what
want
you
me
were
to tell you the funniest part of that is when they talk about edges. Have you heard this? So around your
insane.
and
Yes.
I don't know whether they gel it or I don't know what they do because God forbid you should let your edges
Right?
be
Like they should look
wild.
like our edges. But it's just that it all screams how disconnected we are. And I think I've grown also to have a lot of grace and compassion for that, because it's just showing how removed we are from our own power. And my journey through my natural hair, like for me, has been a closeness to that power. And now with my third transformation, like from relaxed to natural hair, I did that for 10 years. I'm like, after 10 years, I'm gonna lock my hair for hopefully 10 years and see how I feel about that. But this part of my growth has been really revolutionary, because as you said, like I started by researching and reading a lot about how to do it in the most natural way. And I follow this woman called Yanni, the like,
Yeah. Yanni,
for
the like,
me, she's my guide.
yes, yes.
So so I don't do too much. I'm always like minimal products. I've used the same products for years, and I just let my hair show me itself. And I remember even in that development, people like, there is an ugly face, and it's ugly because we associate beauty to look a certain way. And I was like, I'm not gonna have an ugly face. I'm gonna have phases of growth. And I loved every phase of my love journey, and I still do, because I feel like it's all part. It's also teaching you patience and to see yourself. And sometimes I hear people who want to rush the journey, who want to add stuff
Oh,
on.
they'll get like fake locks. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, at the end, I guess like we're all on our own individual journeys. But for me, it's been really liberating. And the bigger my hair grows and the longer even it grows, but like the focus has been on the health and what it's teaching me about myself. And to know that for a long time, my hair wanted to be together, and now it is together.
Now it
It's
is
like
together.
and I'm working with what it naturally wants to do. And therefore, it's easier for me to manage my hair. It was harder to manage it when I was working against my hair. And I
Right.
think like that was something that also changed in the way I see other things in my life. Like, is this hard, or are you using, like, are you, the thing you're trying to do, is it not just not meant for you? Like, that's something you could also question in different parts of your life, where you think that you're trying to make something happen. And we've also very normalized that things should be hard to be worthy of having, or to, like, it's just what you do, like beauty is suffering, stuff like that. I'm like, but really, why is it? Why does it, who benefits from it being
Who
suffering?
decided that? That's right. And who
Yeah.
benefits? Mhm.
Yeah.
A lot of black hair companies here are owned by white people.
Yeah.
Come on.
Makes sense. Makes sense. But you know, like I did my master thesis on exactly that, on the natural hair movement, because for me it was a life-changing experience, especially growing up in Denmark. And I researched how racism, capitalism, and sexism followed in the digital space for the natural hair movement. And it was a revolutionary like research, even for me. Like, it changed the person I was at the end of that, which is what school should do. But like I figured that at the end of it, like, I was so impressed of all how these systems just morph and change, and they follow the evolution of liberation, and they find ways to infiltrate and to change the direction of those liberations. And it makes you become more, what do you call it? Like, you question more even the things that are sold to us as liberation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I like that you are so free in the world and you do question and you don't allow your head to be turned because other people's heads are turned a certain way.
Mm.
So talk to us about your work. What do you do? How can people find you? I will have all May's links in the video. So, but can you tell us what you do in the world?
In
How
the
do you
I
sustain
love the
yourself?
question. I love that question. How, what do I do in the world? I think I'm learning to just exist for now. Like, that's by itself is a miracle. I'm really enjoying existing, because for many years, I've fought a lot to exist in the way that was, again, adaptive to the person I am. I'm a highly sensitive person, and I think that has been a guiding force in my life. I've been very uncomfortable on this earth, and it took me a long time to see that as a blessing, that I couldn't sustain discomfort the same way as other people. So I needed to find solutions. And so a lot of the things I do with my holistic work, holistic decolonial work, are inspired by that journey, where I also try to help other people on that journey to find their own comfort in the world, to create their own comfort in the world. Because like I said in the beginning, I feel like all humans should have a dignified life, and everybody belongs here equally on this beautiful blue planet. So a lot of my work is focused on that, on not only researching and talking about, but also holding sessions for people to find their own holistic and decolonized way of existing and seeing the world, and seeing the things that guide them basically through the world. There's different ways to exist on this planet. That's my biggest mission to share with people. And you don't have to fall in line with any. So yeah, that when you say that my approach is very anarchist in that sense, it is, because I believe we are all our own rulers, and we should live in that way. So I do that. I do sessions.
Do
I do
you do
art.
art? You do art?
Yeah,
Hmm.
I also do art. Of course, also inspired by this world view and this way I approach the world. And I share all of that on my YouTube channel, my Instagram, and I also have an eco printing shop called Boom Baby Bloom Studio. So, but all of that you can find. There's a
Yes,
lot
I
of
have
stuff.
all the links for everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything else that we haven't taught? I'm sure there is because you and I could
There's a
probably.
lot, but you know what I wanted to say, and I wanted to, when you shared in the beginning before we started recording, I think, and I think you feel it too. We are in a beautiful moment in life right now, and as scary as it looks,
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of awful things happening at the same time. But I see it more as a form of like laboring pains, right? There's a lot of things that are being destroyed. And last year, people kept saying that it was the year of the truth. Like, anything that has been done in the dark has come. Like, we are all asked to reckon with the reality of life, and then be met with, now what you're going to do about it. Because no, we can no longer hide comfortably
You know
between.
what I notice? I think it's an American tendency.
Yeah.
Here's how I say it. Americans want things quick, fast, and in a hurry. And so
Mm.
including discomfort. If we have to be uncomfortable, if ugliness has to be exposed,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. I'm all in. Quick, that's in a hurry. It doesn't
Yeah.
work like that.
No.
Does it work? So I will do, videos where I talk about the fact that there will be an inauguration and it will be that person who will be inaugurated.
Mm.
There are a lot of people who are still holding out hope that Kamala Harris is some kind of way gonna pop out and be the one inaugurated. That's not what's gonna happen. So
Mm.
occasionally I'll have people saying, um, why aren't you giving us hope? We need something to hold
Mm.
on to. We need to, well, I don't give false hope.
That's
I
true.
have hope that we can, if we choose to,
Exactly.
learn and grow and be transformed through
Yeah.
this crucible of pain that at least
Mm.
we in the United States and probably the rest of the world,
Mm.
sorry
Mm.
about that, will be going through. But
Mm.
if the pain is deep and the wound is deep, well,
Mm.
how can the healing be superficial?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think like that by itself is the the advice we all as a human being, like as a collective, because so many of our solutions are superficial. And that's why maybe even why I chose an anarchist approach, because the more I research things and I'm like, it shouldn't matter who's in the White House in your situation, for example. We should never have this. It's again the search for the Messiah. We are always looking for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Messiah
yeah.
in everything. And we'll never be free as long as we're looking for the messiahs, because messiahs can be corrupted, messiahs can be replaced. You have to find whatever it is you're seeking within yourself and practice that and not be deterred from that. And I think it cheapens liberation when you hang it on one person or one thing happening. But if I'm always for sustainable liberation and I want it to be, I'm in it for the long run, basically. So I always judge things according to that. Like, is this sustainable? Is this rooted? Is it like getting to the core of the issue, not just superficially? And I think like that has given me more freedom. Like I can still interact and see what's going on, but I'm not deterred from what is happening because I have my own mission and I work with the people who have a similar mission and I continue adding to that part of what I want to see come to fruition. And I think that has made me feel more empowered in the world we live in today. And that's the message I hope other people take with them, that we're going through a rough ride, but your ability to go through it is only your capacity to sit with discomfort and let it be uncomfortable until it's passed through. And discomfort is not a bad thing. And if you've been escaping discomfort for so long, which is why I think we end up with where we are, because people don't want to be uncomfortable and people want the quick fixes and the good lies, we end up repeating the same cycle. And I am done with that. I don't want to contribute to that. So I want rooted change and radical change, like where we take things by the horn, root them from the ground, and build a new world. Yeah.
I'm delighted that you came on with me. I do think that you are a beautiful person with a beautiful spirit and a really inspirational way of living your life that you do show us on YouTube. So I encourage everyone, if you're having a moment, as they say, go watch, just dig back and watch all of her beautiful, beautiful videos that will leave you feeling peaceful, inspired, illuminated, hopeful, and glad to be living in the same world as someone as beautiful as May is.
Oh, thank
But
you.
thank you, May.
Thank you so much, Erica. I would also like to add one thing that I speak a lot of more radical political things, but on my channel, it's more the life I wish existed for all of us. I do have two channels. My Abantu May is the one where it's more political. Like I separated
Oh, I don't know about that one. Oh, I
really, but
that one.
it's okay because I don't update as much. I'm usually collecting and then I go and put a lot of videos there at some point. But like that's where like how I build up my way of thinking. You can follow that process there, and then May in Bloom is what I hope to have bloom in this world and from the knowledge I've gained. So yeah, just in case you're interested
I
in different,
love that you have both. I think that's terrific. That's great.
yeah.
Well, we will have all of that linked in the video.
Thank you so much, Erica, for having me and for creating this beautiful space. I hope it continues to grow and bloom. And I look forward to seeing the next conversations as well.
Absolutely. All right. And everybody, I will see you next week for the beginning of whatever this ride will be like.
Yeah.
Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care.